What if I told you the strongest creatures in Commander aren't giant Eldrazi, dragons or dinosaurs, but instead an army of cute little tiny 2/2 creatures. Duskana the Rage Mother. For 5 mana in Naya colors we get one of the most beautiful commanders that Wizards has ever printed. Seriously, there's just something about this beautiful white mama bear watching over her cubs and staring straight into your soul. Now our big mama bear comes with 2 abilities that all care about creatures having one very specific thing in common, and that is that they have an exact base power and toughness of 2/2. Her first ability states that whenever Duskana enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card for each creature we control with that specific 2/2 base stat line. And thanks to the low mana value of most creatures in this deck, we'll usually be able to resolve Duskana by turn 4, while already having 3 of these small little creatures on the battlefield just waiting for her arrival. Which means she will immediately refill our entire hand with a bunch of new cards, allowing us to keep flooding the battlefield with these 2/2 creatures, while also allowing us to dig really deep into our deck and find any sort of tool we need to protect our board with. Now the really nice thing is that this is an enter the battlefield ability, making blink effects incredibly efficient in this deck because we can just make Duskana leave the battlefield, enter again, and we will draw a whole bunch of new cards of it. And honestly, even if our opponents are able to remove her, we're perfectly happy to cast her again and get another ETB trigger out of her. Now speaking about removing Duskana, eventually your opponents will just have to, and that's thanks to her second ability. Whenever any creature we control with that exact 2/2 base stat line does attack, it will get a +3/+3 stat boost until the end of turn. And what's really unique here is that Duskana doesn't care about what a creature currently looks like, it only cares about its base stat line. So even if you have a small 2/2 creature on the battlefield with 6 +1/+1 counters on it, 3 anthem effects applied and some sort of a giant growth effect, as long as its printed base power and toughness is 2, it will receive Duskana's attack trigger. She'll turn all of these seemingly harmless little creatures into absolute combat machines. This really ended up being one of my favorite deck building projects that I've worked on in a long time. The card pool for Duskana is just absolutely massive, and I even lost some nights of sleep just browsing 2/2 creatures on my phone. In theory, you could play any creature with that base 2/2 stat line and Duskana will make it work. In fact, I used this specific query on Scryfall, which alone already returned more than 1,700 cards. And yes, I went over every single one of them. But I didn't stop there. I also used this query that returned every card in Naya colors that's possible of generating 2/2 creature tokens, which returned another 230 results, just making sure that I wasn't about to miss any sort of hidden gem for this type of game plan. After days of digging through thousands of cards, testing interactions, and trimming the list down to 100 cards over and over again, this list ended up being what is in my opinion the strongest all-around version of Duskana that's available. But because there are so many cards that didn't make it into the final list, I did decide to do something special this video. At the very end, I will be doing some sort of a rapid fire section of some of the cards I was considering and found particularly interesting. I'll be explaining the reasonings as to why I did not include them in the main deck and what sort of play groups these specific cards are better suited for. As I do in all my videos, I will be going over every single card in the deck and explaining why I decided to include it. This video is divided up into 6 categories: the acceleration, token generators, the synergy pieces, card draw, protection and interaction, and the lands. And let's kick things off by taking a look at our acceleration package. Now, while most of the creatures in this deck are incredibly cheap to cast, all of our mana dorks do serve some sort of a double purpose. Since most of these do have a 2/2 base stat line, they will draw us cards whenever Duskana comes down, and whenever she then is on the battlefield, we can just turn them sideways and point them at our opponents and they will receive the +3/+3 stat boost. Wandertail Mentor, a 2-drop creature we can tap to add either a red or a green mana to our mana pool, and it does come with the expand mechanic from the Bloomburrow set. Whenever we spend our 4th mana in a turn, this creature will get a +1/+1 counter. And since we'll always be spending mana every turn, this creature will just keep growing bigger and bigger with its counters, while still receiving Duskana's +3/+3 stat boost whenever we attack with it, thanks to its 2/2 base stat line. And let's be honest, who doesn't like a raccoon playing music and summoning a band of little animals? And just like I explained in the intro of the video, these 2-drop mana dorks do serve a very specific purpose in this deck. On turn 2 you'll be able to resolve one of these mana dorks, then on turn 3 you will have a total of 4 mana available and you will be able to play an additional 2 2-drops, and by the time you then get to your turn 4 you will be able to play Duskana, draw 3 cards because you have 3 2/2 bodies on the battlefield, and you will then instantly be able to swing with 2 of those 2/2 creatures and deal a total of 10 damage to whatever opponent you like. And talking about cards that are all about cute little animals, Animal Attendant. Another 2-drop creature we can tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, and if we do spend it on a non-human spell, that creature will enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Especially considering that we are playing a total of 31 non-human creatures in this deck, giving us a way to further buff up our 2/2 creatures will be casting while they will still apply for Duskana's attack trigger thanks to them having a base 2/2 stat line, while at the same time also making it really easy to trigger some of the counter synergies we're playing in this deck that you will see in a later section. Intrepid Paleontologist. Another 2-drop creature we can tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, but it also comes with another activated ability. For 2 generic mana on instant speed we get to exile any card from any graveyard, and this little ability has the potential to just lock out of the game some specific decks. You can use it to exile a Necrobloom's player's lands from their graveyard so they have no way to get them back. If you're playing against any sort of reanimation player, you can just exile any sort of big creature threat they are trying to reanimate, and even if a Spellslinger player has a stacked graveyard, you can just exile their Past in Flames and they won't be able to start recasting their cantrips. And this thing also comes with a very niche passive ability that will allow you to cast any sort of dinosaur creature that you exiled with this effect. Now while we're not playing any dinosaurs in our own list, if you are playing against an opponent and you do manage to exile their Itali with this effect, this little passive ability might just win you the game. Spider Manifestation. A reach creature we can tap to add a red or a green mana to our mana pool, and whenever we cast any spell with mana value 4 or greater we get to untap it. Now while this might seem really out of place in a deck that's all about 2/2 creatures, it functions in exactly the same way as all of the previous mana dorks, allowing us to play Duskana on turn 4 and draw 3 cards of it, and whenever you do cast Duskana or any of our big value enchantments you get to untap this creature, and it is essentially a 2 mana mana dork that will tap for 2 mana, which in some situations might just give you that little bit of mana that you need to cast a protection spell to prevent your entire board of being destroyed by a board wipe. Tender Wild Guide. A 2-drop creature we can tap to either add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool or to put a +1/+1 counter on itself, making it into an excellent mana dork body that over the course of the game, whenever we don't need the mana, we can just tap to keep growing itself and trigger all of our counter synergies. And it also comes with the Offspring mechanic, meaning whenever we cast this creature we get the option to pay 2 additional generic mana and it will enter with a 1/1 token copy of itself. Now while sadly the copy will only have a 1/1 base stat line and won't generate you any value with Duskana, this thing is just an excellent creature to cast on your turn 3, because you can play any sort of 2-drop mana dork on turn 2, Offspring discard on your turn 3, and you will then have a huge amount of mana available for your next turn and set up some really crazy value scenarios with Duskana. And the best gameplay tip I can give you for this deck is that whenever you draw your opening hand, you want to see at least one of these 2 mana acceleration options. We are playing a total of 9 of them, so chances are pretty high that you'll see at least one, but otherwise just take the mulligan, because this deck feels really slow and clunky to play if you don't have any acceleration available to you. Twitching Doll, the best mana dork in this entire deck. It's another 2-drop creature you can tap for any color, and whenever you tap it you do get to put a nest counter on it, which on a later turn will interact with its second ability that gives you the option to sacrifice Twitching Doll and you get to generate a 2/2 reach spider token for each counter this card had on itself. So you can just play this as a regular mana dork and use it for mana, and it will start stacking up these nest counters over the course of the game. Then on a later turn, if you are about to cast Duskana again, you can just crack this little creature, generate like 5 of these spider tokens, and you will get to draw a ton of cards of Duskana's ETB ability, and on a later turn you will be able to swing with all of those spiders, which will turn into massive 5/5 death machines thanks to Duskana's attack trigger. And a really fun thing about Twitching Doll is that its ability doesn't state nest counters. You will get to generate 1 spider token for any sort of counter that you have on this creature, which does synergize incredibly well with cards like Animal Attendant and any of the other counter stackers you will see later in the video. Goblin Commander. Instead of giving us the ability to tap it for mana, instead it will reduce the cost of any green or red spell we cast by 1 generic mana, which in some situations makes it a lot more efficient than regular mana dorks. Because if you have this thing on the battlefield from as early as turn 2, you'll then be able to cast a Tender Wild Guide, a Spider Manifestation, and even a Twitching Doll, all from as early as turn 3, because you can use the cost reduction multiple times in a single turn. Generous Plunderer, a creature that at the beginning of our upkeep gives us the option to generate a treasure token, and if we do, target opponent also gets to generate a treasure, making it function in exactly the same way as all of the other 2-drop mana dorks that I talked about, while also giving us the option that if we don't need the treasure mana immediately, we can just start stacking up treasure tokens and gain access to a huge burst of mana on the turn that we need it most. It also comes with a really potent attack trigger that whenever this creature attacks, it will deal damage to the defending player equal to the total amount of artifacts they control. Scaling perfectly with the treasure tokens, it will generate for your opponents, just allowing you to sneak little bits of damage in. And if you are playing in a pot with some artifact decks like a Bria or a Mendicant Core, this creature is just their worst nightmare, because this little triggered ability will suddenly deal a total of like 20 or 30 damage if their board is filled with artifacts. And if those 2 awesome abilities aren't enough, this thing also comes with a menace keyword. So whenever you swing with this thing and have Duskana on the battlefield, it will be an evasive 5/5 body, making it really easy to get damage in. And talking about treasure tokens, we're also playing Black Market Tycoon, which is a 2-drop creature we can tap to generate as a treasure token, just allowing us to stack them up over the course of the game for the turn we need the most. But it also comes with the downside that at the beginning of our upkeep, this creature will deal 2 damage to us for each treasure token we control. Now, while this might sound really intimidating, I can assure you that it's never going to be a problem, because if you do get to a turn where you're on a really low life total and you do control a bunch of treasures, before you get to your upkeep you can just crack all of them and this thing won't deal any damage to you. Now let's get into 2 of the best acceleration options in the entire deck. The first one being Atalan Jackal, which is a 3-drop trample haste creature that whenever it does deal combat damage to an opponent will allow us to fetch up any basic land from our deck straight to the battlefield tapped. Yeah, this thing is just completely nuts in this deck. You can just drop it early game on turn 3 and usually you will have one opponent that doesn't have any blockers, allowing you to just accelerate your mana for free. And once you do have Duskana on the battlefield, whenever you now swing with this creature, it will become a massive 5/5 trample body, allowing you to always get combat damage through and get its ramp trigger, just allowing you to keep accelerating your mana while also filtering all of the basic lands from your deck. Even if you get to the really late stages of the game, thanks to this card having haste, you're always happy to draw it, because you just need your Duskana on the battlefield, play this creature, and you will instantly be able to generate value with it. Alright, now let's get into my favorite card in the entire deck. Prosperous Bandit, a 3-mana first strike creature that whenever it does deal combat damage to an opponent will allow us to generate that many treasure tokens. Yeah, I honestly don't think I need to explain how crazy this card is when combined with Duskana, because whenever you now swing with this little raccoon thief, it will get a +3/+3 stat boost, and whenever it connects, it will generate you a massive 5 treasure tokens. Now, while just that synergy alone is already more than enough reason to include this card in the deck, thanks to this thing having the offspring mechanic, it also fits our mana curve curve perfectly. You can just drop any sort of 2-drop mana dork on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you will be able to cast this card including its offspring cost, which will generate you another 1/1 of these raccoon tokens with exactly the same ability. Now while his little offspring raccoon friend obviously doesn't scale with Duskana's abilities, in this deck, as you will see later, we do have a ton of ways to buff up the 1/1 token, either be it through anthem effects, counter stacking, or even giving us the option to give it double strike, which will generate us even more treasure tokens. Next up we have our token generation. This section contains all of the cards that are dedicated to putting additional 2/2 creature tokens on the battlefield. Whether that's in the form of a consistent stream of creature tokens every single turn, or in the form of a massive burst of tokens at once, every additional 2/2 body will be converted into additional card draw thanks to Duskana and will receive the massive +3/+3 stat boost whenever we swing with them. Spawn right. Let's open this section with one of the strongest creatures in the entire list. It's a simple 3-drop 2/2 trample body that whenever it does deal combat damage to an opponent will allow you to generate a token copy of itself. And this thing is just absolutely broken when combined with Duskana's stat boosting, because whenever you attack with this thing and you do have your big mama bear on the battlefield, it will be a 5/5 trample creature, making it incredibly easy to get combat damage through and start generating you those spawn right copies. And on future turns, every spawn right copy you now swing with will also turn into a massive 5/5 trample body, really making this into an exponential growing card that can take over the game all by itself. Just imagine you dropping this on turn 3 and then following up with Duskana on turn 4. If your opponents don't remove any of these two creatures, you will just be able to start swinging with it and your board will start scaling incredibly fast. Even on a later turn, if they do decide to remove your Duskana from the equation, you can just recast her again and you will get to draw a gazillion cards thanks to all of your spawn right copies. The Sea Devils. And this card is just the perfect example why running specific Scryfall queries like this one does give you the ability to find you some hidden gems. If I didn't approach deck building in the way that I do, I would have never known this card existed. And this saga truly is an insane addition for what we're trying to do in this deck. Its first and its second stage will generate you a really weird looking 2/2 salamander alien token with Island Walk, which already by itself is some really solid value because you'll be able to play this on turn 3, and by the time you get to your turn 4 you will have 2 additional 2/2 bodies on the battlefield and you will get to draw 2 additional cards of Duskana. But where the real money is at is this saga's third and final stage, that until the end of turn, whenever any sort of salamander creature you control does deal combat damage to an opponent, will allow you to deal that much damage to any creature they control, which means that by the time you get to your turn 5 and you do have Duskana on the battlefield, you will be able to swing with 2 massive 5/5 salamander tokens, and whenever they do connect, you will essentially get to remove any creature your opponents have on the board for absolutely free. Especially considering that due to the fact that these salamander tokens do have Island Walk, the only thing you need is your opponents to have a survey land, a triome, a shock land, or even a basic land that does have the island typing on the battlefield, and they won't even be able to block them. And another saga we are playing is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. The first stage will generate you a 2/2 Goblin Shaman token that whenever it attacks will generate you an untapped treasure token, making it function in exactly the same way as Captain Lannery Storm, giving you another 5/5 body to swing with Duskana on the battlefield while at the same time also accelerating your mana. The second option will allow you to loot up to 2 cards, which might be a really nice tool to just discard any cards you don't need at the current given board state and replace them with new ones. And the third and final stage will allow you to transform the saga into its backside, which basically is Kiki Jiki at home. For 1 generic mana, and tapping it will allow us to create a token copy out of any non-legendary creature we control, and we have to sacrifice it at the end of turn. And in this deck we do have some really great targets for its effect. We can generate another salamander token on the turn that the Sea Devils does get to its final stage, another copy out of our Talon Jackal to just accelerate our mana even further. We can copy our Spawn Right with this effect to just start our exponential token growing, or use it on any of the awesome cards you're about to see later in this video. Adipose Offspring, a 4-drop creature that will enter the battlefield accompanied by a 2/2 white alien token. Now, like I mentioned, with all of the previous cards, paying 4 mana for 2 2/2 tokens is already some pretty solid base value. But what makes this card into an auto-inclusion in whatever sort of Duskana deck that you're building is the fact that it comes with the emerge mechanic, meaning that we get the ability to cast it for 6 mana, and when we do, we get the option to sacrifice any of our creatures. The emerge cost of this card will then be reduced by the mana value of whatever creature we did sacrifice. And whenever we do decide to cast it by using the emerge mechanic, instead of just generating us a single alien token, we get to generate tokens equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness instead. And let me tell you, this thing is just crazy, because whenever you do have your Duskana on the battlefield, you can just attack with all of your 2/2 creatures. They will receive the +3/+3 stat boost, and it will last until the end of turn, meaning that you will be able to cast this card in your second main phase and you will get to generate a huge amount of alien tokens, especially considering that the sacrificed creature will have 3 more toughness thanks to Duskana. Now, as a small side note, if you do have a bunch of your clothes lying on the ground and white creatures start crawling from amongst them, it really is time to power up your washing machine and do your laundry. As Sika's Chariot, another 4 mana card that whenever it enters the battlefield will generate you 2 2/2 creature tokens. But whenever you do crew this vehicle for 4 and you attack with it, you get to create a token copy out of any creature token you already control. Now, while this card is mainly included to generate us those 2 cat tokens for 4 mana, I suppose that later in the game you can use it to generate additional salamanders of your Sea Devils, or you can even use it to get an additional treasure generating Goblin Shaman token on the battlefield. And a classic card that any commander player knows and you could have guessed was gonna be in the deck is a Validar Retreat, which is a 4 mana enchantment that whenever any land enters the battlefield under our control gives us the option to pick one out of its 2 options. The first option will generate us an additional 2/2 cat creature token, just providing us with a steady stream of additional 2/2 bodies on the battlefield, while the second option will allow us to put a +1/+1 counter onto our entire board and also give them vigilance until the end of turn, which makes this card incredibly versatile, both giving us a way to make our board go even wider, giving us additional bodies to buff up with Duskana and draw additional cards off, while also in the late game functioning as an excellent win condition, because no matter how much counters we put onto all of our creatures, they will still receive Duskana's attack trigger for as long as they just have the base stat line of 2/2. And a card that always makes me feel really nostalgic because I started playing Magic during the Terrell set is Xenagos the Reveler. It's a 4 mana planeswalker with a 0 loyalty ability that just fits this deck perfectly. And the ability is really simple. It will just straight up generate you a 2/2 haste Satyr token, which thanks to Duskana will instead be massive 5/5 go tokens you can immediately swing with. Or you can just use this ability a couple of times, just preparing for the turn you're about to cast Duskana to draw a huge amount of cards of them. Now, while his 0 ability is the main reason he's included in this deck because he's a token generating machine, his +1 ability also is quite nice in this deck. It will generate you a mix of red and green mana equal to the total amount of creatures you control, which in this type of deck where we'll be generating a bunch of tokens and playing a ton of low cost creatures will always generate you a ton of mana, making it really easy to just recast Duskana no matter how much commander tags that she has, allowing us to drop some of our game winning bombs way earlier than we should, or just allowing us to dump massive amounts of mana in the next 2 spells you're about to see. Finale of Glory. For 2 white mana plus X, we get to generate X 2/2 soldier tokens with vigilance. Now, first up, and I know I keep repeating myself, this is just the perfect card to play on your turn 3, because thanks to your 2-drop mana dorks, you will be able to invest 4 mana into this spell and you will get 2 creature tokens in return, which is some really solid value. But obviously where X spells like these really shine is whenever you do get to the later stages of the game. Once you do have a bunch of mana dorks on the battlefield, a huge amount of treasure tokens thanks to your Prosperous Bandit, or whenever you are able to plus up your Xenagos with like 5 creatures on the battlefield, you will be able to dump a huge amount of mana into this, just generating you a crazy board state of these 2/2 tokens that Duskana will turn into at least 5/5 creature bodies whenever you swing with them. And this spell just gets truly ridiculous whenever you are able to cast it with X being 10 or more, because not only will you get to generate this army of vigilance tokens, you will will also get to generate that many 4/4 angel tokens with flying, which obviously don't have any interaction with Duskana's abilities, but yeah, I mean, it is an army of 4/4 flying creatures. And yet another X-Cost token generator we are playing that's even better is Fort Earlingas, because instead of just generating us vigilance tokens, it will generate us 2/2 trample haste tokens instead. And those two keywords combined are just truly busted when combined with Duskana. Let's just say you do have your Mama Bear on the battlefield and you are able to cast this card with X being 5. You will then instantly generate 5 of these tokens, which you will instantly be able to swing with. They will all receive the +3/+3 stat boost thanks to Duskana, and you will be able to swing for a massive 25 haste trample damage, which usually will allow you to just instantly take an opponent out of the game on the spot. On top of that, on the turn you cast a spell, if any of your creatures do deal combat damage to an opponent, you become the Monarch, which means at the end of turn you'll just get to draw an additional card, and in a combat heavy deck like this one, it will be really easy to just gain the Monarch emblem back whenever you lose it. And the last card in this section is a Virtue of Loyalty, which you can play on instant speed for just 2 mana to generate you a 2/2 vigilance token, making it into a really solid card to play on your turn 3 together with another 2-drop creature to set you up for a crazy turn 4 with Duskana. And the nice thing about these adventure cards is that whenever you cast them, instead of going to your graveyard, you get to exile them instead. On a later turn, you will then be able to cast the enchantment part of this card for a total of 5 mana, which at the beginning of your end step will put a +1/+1 counter on all creatures you control, and you also get to untap them, both scaling our board even further and making it easier for us to just win the game on combat damage, triggering all of the counter synergies that we're playing, and at the same time also giving all of our creatures some sort of pseudo vigilance by just untapping them. Next up we have our synergy pieces. Now, while simply flooding the board with a bunch of 2/2 creatures is already a really solid game plan, these are the cards that truly make the deck come together. From powerful blink effects that allow us to re-trigger Duskana's EDB ability, to global anthem effects that just boost the stats of our entire board even further, some incredible value or unique utility creatures, and even some of our primary win cons, these are the cards that elevate our deck even further and actually allow us to close out games. Goro Goro, Disciple of Ryusei, a 2-drop legendary creature that for just 1 red mana will give all of our creatures haste. And getting access to a global haste enabler on a 2/2 creature body is just perfect for this deck, because it will instantly allow us to swing with whatever 2/2 creature body or 2/2 creature token that we created, just putting immense amounts of pressure onto our opponents. Let's say you cast a Finale of Glory generating you 5 of these soldier tokens. For just 1 mana you will be able to use Gogoro's activated ability, and whenever you do have your white Mama Bear on the battlefield, you will instantly be able to swing for a total of 25 damage, while at the same time also allowing us to instantly trigger any sort of combat damage trigger on the turn we play any creature, like a Prosperous Bandit, generating us some instant creature tokens with a spawn right, or even enabling us to instantly use any sort of creature body we play with a tap ability like a Fauna Shaman, which is basically a survival of the fittest attached to a 2/2 creature body. For 1 green mana, tapping it and discarding a creature card, we get to fetch up any creature from our deck straight to our hand. And this little ability just allows us to ditch any sort of card we don't need and fetch up the specific thing we need most at the current given board state. Be it a Goro as a haste enabler, an Adipose Offspring to just generate us a huge amount of 2/2 creature tokens, or even an Atalan Jackal to start accelerating our mana. We truly have a 2/2 creature in this deck for any sort of scenario. Philia, Exuberant Shepherd. Now, I know that I mentioned blinking Duskana a couple of times throughout the video, and Philia is just the perfect card to do it with. It's a 2 mana 2/2 good boy with flash that whenever it attacks gives us the option to exile any sort of other non-land permanent. The permanent will then return to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step, and if we control that permanent, we even get to put a +1/+1 counter onto Philia. Now, while the most obvious use of this ability is just blinking Duskana and drawing like 5 to 10 cards in the process, we can do a couple of other things with it. You can blink your Esika's Chariot to generate you even more cat tokens, you can blink your Sea Devils to generate you even more salamander tokens, and you can even use it whenever you attack to remove any any of your opponent's blockers and you will be able to get a hit in. And the coolest part is that whenever we blink any of our own permanents, Phelia's body will just keep growing bigger and bigger over the course of the game until she becomes a tangible threat. Sir Farron the Henchhammer, which is perfectly on theme for this deck because he is a dude riding a bear. Whenever this creature attacks, we get the option to give another creature we control a +X stat boost until the end of turn, X being Sir Farron's power. Now while this might seem like a really underwhelming effect, we can actually decide how we want to stack our combat triggers. Let's say you get to your turn 4 and you have this creature, another 2/2 creature and Duskana on the battlefield. You can then attack with both of your 2/2 creatures and you will get 2 triggers from Duskana. You decide to resolve those first and grow both creatures into 5/5 bodies. Then you can choose to resolve Sir Farron's trigger, giving another +5/+5 stat boost to the other 2-drop, and you will be able to swing for a massive amount of 15 damage from as early as turn 4. And the power boost this card gives obviously gets even better whenever we are able to increase its power with any of our anthem effects or with our counter stacking. Ryan Sinclair, a 3-drop creature that whenever it attacks allows us to exile the top cards of our library until we reveal a non-land card. If the mana value of that card is less than or equal to Ryan's power, we get to cast that card for absolutely free. Now obviously whenever you swing with Ryan and you do have your white mama bear on the battlefield, he will always have at least 5 power. And considering we're only playing 3 cards in the entire deck that will cost us more than 5 mana, Ryan will essentially allow you to play 1 spell for free every single turn, just scaling the tempo of this deck even further. Skyhunter Strike Force, a 3-mana flying creature with melee that whenever you do have your commander on the battlefield will give every creature you control the melee mechanic, which basically means all of your creatures will get a +1/+1 stat boost until the end of turn for each opponent you decided to attack. So the only thing you have to do during combat is swing one of your creatures at each one of your opponents and all of your creatures will get another massive +3/+3 stat boost, which indeed will stack with Duskana's stat boost and will result into a massive total of +6/+6 for all of your creatures, making this little flying evasive body into one of the most solid win cons in the entire deck. Silverblade Paladin, a 3-drop creature with the soulbound mechanic, meaning whenever this creature or any other creature enters a battlefield under your control, you get the option to pair them. And when you do, both Silverblade Paladin and whatever thing this is paired to will both get the double strike keyword. Now obviously keeping in mind that all of our creatures will have at least a 5/5 stat line thanks to Duskana whenever we swing with them, this will make both of your creatures swing for a total of 10 damage, just allowing you to take away half of one of your opponent's life totals. And that's not even taking into account any additional anthem effects, any sort of counter stacking, or you having a Skyhunter Strike Force or a Sir Farron on the battlefield, because this thing will generate you some truly crazy numbers. And if you do manage to pair this thing to any of our creatures that do have combat damage triggers like a Prosperous Bandit or an Italian Jackal, he will even double up on those. And talking about counter stacking and buffing up our creatures, we're also playing a Warden of the Grove, which is a 3-drop 2/2 creature that at the beginning of your end step will put a +1/+1 counter on itself, just growing bigger and bigger over the course of the game, which does synergize really well with its second ability, that whenever any non-token creature you control enters the battlefield will make it endure X. X being the total amount of counters on this creature. Now endure basically means you get the option to put X +1/+1 counters on that creature that enters the battlefield, or you get to generate an XX spirit token. Now usually whenever you endure, you will be going for the counter stacking option, just making any 2/2 creature that enters the battlefield enter with a way bigger body that will even receive a bigger and bigger stat boost the longer the game goes on, because you will be growing your Warden of the Grove, let alone you using any sort of other counter stacking effect like a Felidar Tree to just make this creature have even more counters and hand out even more. Now there is one crucial turn where you won't actually be picking the counter option with enduring, but you do want to generate tokens, and that is whenever this creature does get to 2 counters, because every creature you now play will give you the option to generate a 2/2 spirit token, which yes, does count as its base power and toughness, just giving you even more bodies to draw off with Duskana and to start buffing up and taking your opponents out of the game with. Sylvan Awakening, some sort of a secret deck card for Duskana decks. It's a 3 mana sorcery speed spell that until the end of turn will turn all of your lands into 2/2 reach haste indestructible creatures. And let me tell you, whenever you do draw into this card in the late game, you are going to have a really good time. Because let's say you do have a total of 7 lands on the battlefield, you can just animate them with this card, and thanks to Duskana, whenever you now swing with them, they will deal a total of 35 damage, which, trust me, your opponents will never see coming. Now my favorite part about this card is that it also gives all of your lands indestructible, so even if your opponents do decide to block them, you won't actually be losing any lands in the process. Wolverine, the best there is. Now this card might actually be the strongest 2/2 statline creature in existence because it does come with 3 really crazy abilities. First up, it has a passive effect that will double all of the damage that Wolverine will do. So whenever you attack with it with your mama bear on the battlefield, he will always deal at least 10 damage. And that's not even taking into account combining him with cards like Surfangren, Skyhunter Strikeforce, or even your Silverblade Paladin, because yes, Wolverine's ability does stack with Double Strike. His second ability at the beginning of each end step will check if Wolverine did deal damage to a creature. If he did, you do get to put a +1/+1 counter on him. And this ability does give your opponents a choice. Either they let Wolverine's damage come true and they take a hit of like 20 damage, or they do decide to block him and he will just grow and swing for even more damage on the next turn. And Hugh Jackman doesn't even stop there because he also comes with some built-in protection. Perfectly on theme for Wolverine's abilities in both the comics and the movies is that by paying 2 mana we get to regenerate him. So if an opponent is casting a board wipe, a spot removal spell, or trying to block Wolverine with a really big creature, we can just pay 2 green mana and it will be really hard for your opponents to ever get this off the board. Windcrag Siege, a 3 mana enchantment that whenever it enters the battlefield will make us choose one out of its 2 options. But in this deck we will always be picking the first one, that whenever any creature attacking would cause any ability of a permanent we control to trigger will make it trigger an additional time. And yes, this thing actually works with Duskana's first ability. Whenever you now attack with any sort of 2/2 creature, every single one of them will now receive a +6/+6 stat boost, which as you can imagine is just a ridiculous amount, and you only need a couple of 2/2 creatures on the battlefield to actually be able to win the game with this effect. And this card has so many more uses in this deck. You can use it to get 2 triggers out of Ryan Sinclair, you'll be able to blink 2 permanents with Philia, you'll get 2 triggers out of Sir Farron, which will allow you to give another +16/+16 stat boost to another creature you control, and whenever you have this thing on the battlefield combined with a Skyhunter Strikeforce and Duskana, your entire board will get a +12/+12 stat boost. And a card with a very similar effect is Any Joins Up. Now first up, whenever this 4 mana enchantment enters the battlefield, you get to ping 5 damage to any creature on the battlefield, just generating you some immediate value whenever you cast it in the form of creature removal. And then for as long as this card is on the battlefield and an ability of any sort of legendary creature you control would trigger, it will trigger an additional time, which will give you exactly the same benefits as a Windcrag Siege, but it isn't limited to attack triggers. The most important thing is that it will even double up on Duskana's draw trigger, and it will make it really easy to draw like 10 to 20 cards in a single turn. And now that we're talking about doubling up on our value, we're also playing Gogo, Mysterious Mime, which is a card that nowadays I do find myself including in any sort of red deck that I build. The value is just too good. It's a 2/2 creature body that at the beginning of combat on our turn we can turn into a copy of any other creature we control, but its name will remain Gogo, which basically allows us to bypass the legend rule and even create copies out of any sort of legendary that we do control. Then after that has happened, both Gogo and whatever creature he did copy will get a +2 power boost and haste until the end of turn. Now first up, this thing already functions as a fantastic haste enabler, just allowing you to drop Surfang Langren or Ryan Sinclair, instantly give them a stat boost and haste and you will be able to swing with them, instantly triggering their abilities, which will happen 2 times because Gogo will also be a copy of those creatures. But where this thing gets absolutely ridiculous is whenever you do combine it with Duskana, because you will now have 2 mama bears on the battlefield, and whenever you swing with a 2/2 creature, it will receive a massive +6/+6 stat boost. Just imagine having both a Gogo and an Any joins up on the battlefield at the same time. You will need a calculator to know how much damage you'll be dealing. Ultramarines on our guard. A 4 mana 2/2 creature that will passively give any other creature you control a +1/+1 stat boost. Now, while Anthem effects like these are obviously fantastic when combined with Duskana because all of your 2/2 creatures will still apply for her stat boost, usually you don't really want to be rushing out this creature from as early as possible, and it's better to wait until you do have more mana available. And that is due to this card having the squad mechanic, meaning whenever you cast it you get the option to pay 2 generic mana any amount of times, and for every time you do so you will get a creature token copy of this creature, which will give you even more 2/2 bodies to benefit from our commander's abilities and additional layers of its Anthem effect, which will even stack with the token copies that this creature generates for you. Glorious Sunrise, a 5 mana enchantment that comes with 4 options, and we get to pick one at the beginning of each one of our combat steps. The first and the main reason why this card is included in the deck is that it will give a +1/+1 stat boost and trample to our entire board. Now obviously with all of the Anthem effects, counter stacking and Duskana's power boosting ability, our creatures will always have a huge amount of stats. But we still do need a way to give our entire board trample, just making sure we can get damage through, because if you are playing against a Krenko player that controls like 7 gazillion goblins, they'll just be able to chum block all of your massive creatures and you won't actually be able to win the game with them. Now if you don't have an established board state yet, or you aren't planning on going for a win, you can use its second ability that will give one of your lands the ability that you can tap it for 3 green mana, just giving you additional acceleration to set up your board with, and on a later turn you can then win by using its first mode. The third ability will allow you to draw a card if you do control a creature with power 3 or greater, just providing us with some additional card advantage, and the last mode will gain you a little bit of life, which I suppose in some situations might help you stabilize your life total if you are about to lose the game. Nahiri's Resolve, a 5 mana enchantment that will give all of your creatures a +1 power boost and haste, which just like I explained with Goro Goro will allow you to instantly swing with any sort of 2/2 creature or creature token that you generate, just generating you immense amounts of pressure, while even improving all of the combat damage that your creatures would deal by 1 point. Now while obviously paying 5 mana for this effect isn't really the best deal, it also comes with an additional ability that at the beginning of your end step will allow you to blink any sort of creatures you control and then return them to the battlefield, which will give you a way to make Duskana enter the battlefield again and draw an additional 10 cards of her. And since all of your creatures will enter the battlefield untapped again, it also gives them some sort of pseudo vigilance. Smile at that, a card I've been wanting to include in any of my decks from the moment it got revealed, and this Duskana list is just the perfect home for it. It's a 5 mana enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep will allow you to pick 2 creatures from your graveyard with power 2 or less and return them to the battlefield. They will even enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them. And this card just gives the deck an incredible layer of resilience, because as you can imagine, the biggest weakness of this type of creature heavy list are board wipes. And this thing just totally solves that problem, because even if you lose like 6 creatures on the board, you can just play this card, and every time it's your turn again, you will just be able to recur 2 of those creatures, because any creature in this list basically has 2 power, and it will be really easy for you to just re-establish your board state and threaten a win really quickly. Now even outside of your creatures being removed by board wipes or spot removal, we do have other ways to get things into our graveyard, like the second stage of Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and my favorite interaction is that whenever you start discarding creatures with your Fauna Shaman, this enchantment will just grab them right back straight to the battlefield. The Eternal Eternal Wanderer, the second planeswalker we're playing in this deck. Her first +1 ability will, just like Philia, allow you to blink any artifact or creature on the battlefield, simply giving us yet another way to make Duskana re-enter the battlefield and draw us a gazillion cards again. Her 0 ability will allow us to generate a 2/2 Samurai token with double strike that, thanks to Duskana, will have at least a 5/5 stat line and will swing for a massive amount of 10 damage. And her last ability will make us choose one creature for each player and then they have to sacrifice the rest. Now, while that ability isn't all that great because we are a deck ourselves that wants to set up a really wide board state, if you do get behind on the board against some other creature heavy decks, this ability can function as a really solid panic button, just totally decimating all of your opponent's boards and making sure they have to set it up all over again. And she also comes with a really nice passive ability that only one creature can attack her each combat, making it pretty hard for your opponents to ever get her off the board because you only need one blocker to protect her. Wild Pair, a 6-mana enchantment that whenever we cast any creature card from our hand will allow us to go fetch up any creature with the exact same stat line from our deck straight to the battlefield. Now, as you can imagine, with almost all creatures in this deck having the exact 2/2 stat line, this thing is just a tutor and value engine. If you cast your Wolverine, you can just instantly go and fetch up your Silverblade Paladin and pair them up. You can cast your Skyhunter Strike Force and fetch up your Gogo to just instantly get 2 instances out of its ability. Or whenever you have 6 mana available, you can just cast 3 2-drop creatures, fetch up 2 2-drops that just boost the stats of your creatures, and the last creature can be a Gogo, which will enable you to give everything haste and just swing for a huge amount of damage instantly. Yeah, this thing just fetches you up anything and it is an absolute powerhouse in this deck. And the last card in this section, and everyone's favorite game finishing creature, is a Crater Hoof Behemoth. A massive 8 mana haste creature that whenever it enters the battlefield will give your entire board a +X/+X stat boost and trample. X being the total amount of creatures you control. Yeah, you could have guessed that our big boy was gonna be included in the deck. Since we'll always have a ton of creatures on the battlefield, it will give a massive stat boost. More importantly, it will give all of our creatures trample, which will allow us to just swing through chum blockers. And this thing is just the perfect creature to go tutor up with your Fauna Shaman if you do need a win condition. Before we continue, I want to give a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members supporting the channel. These in-depth Commander videos actually do take a lot of time to put together. Between me digging through thousands of cards to find the hidden gems, testing out all of the interactions in the decks, and making sure these videos actually look good by adding the visuals, there's always a lot going on behind the scenes. So to everyone who's already supporting the channel, thank you. Your support is what allows me to keep cranking out these high quality videos week after week, and it wouldn't be possible without you. So if you're enjoying the content and you want to support the channel for yourself, there's a big join button below the video. You'll get access to some exclusive Discord chat rooms where I'm always sharing what projects I'm currently working on weeks before the videos even go live. You get some awesome custom Panzer emojis you can use anywhere on Discord or YouTube. And of course, that glorious Panzer helmet next to your name in the comments. Next up, we have the card draw. While obviously Duskana already provides us with an insane amount of card advantage straight in the command zone, fully relying on our commander is never a great idea. These are the card draw engines that will make sure our entire hand is filled throughout the game, making sure we always have more creatures to deploy, more interaction to disrupt our opponents and to protect our own board, and more gas to keep applying pressure to our opponents even whenever Duskana isn't on the battlefield. Glimmerlance, a 2-mana equipment with the 4 Mirrodin mechanic, meaning that whenever it enters the battlefield it does come attached to a 2/2 creature token, both giving us an additional 2/2 body we can draw cards of with Duskana and we can boost up with her combat ability, and whenever you attack with a creature equipped with this thing and at least one other creature, you will get to draw another card. Some pretty solid value for just 2 mana. And one of my favorite things to do with this card is use either Philia or Nahiri's Resolve to just blink it and make it enter again, and you will get an additional 2/2 creature token. Mikey and Leo, chaos and order. Now I know that I've been talking about counter synergies a ton in this video already, and this is the main synergy I'm talking about. Because whenever we put any sort of counter onto any creature we control, we get to draw a card. This ability will only trigger once per turn. Now while we aren't a dedicated counter deck, we do have a ton of ways to actually trigger this effect. We can deal damage to creatures with Wolverine, blink any of our own permanents with Philia, get a counter onto something with our animal attendant, spend 4 mana with our Wandertail Mentor on the battlefield, or we can even tap our Twitching Doll during an opponent's turn to bypass the once per turn restriction and draw even more cards of this effect. Black Panther, Wakandan King. It's a 2-drop first strike creature that whenever itself or any other creature enters a battlefield under our control will allow us to put a +1/+1 counter onto any of our lands. Now while this effect does sound really weird at first, that's where his activated ability comes in. Because by paying 3 generic mana we get to pick any amount of counters on a land we control and move them onto one of our creatures. After we did that, we get to gain life equal to the amount of counters that we moved, and we also get to draw a card, giving us access to a pretty nice ability to just buff up our creatures to truly insane amounts while also functioning as an excellent card draw engine in the process. And this thing has a truly crazy interaction whenever you do combine it with Sylvan Awakening, because you can just stack a ton of counters onto your lands by playing your creatures and generating tokens, and then later in the game you can just animate said lands and you will be able to deal a huge amount of damage that your opponents will never see coming. Phineas, Ace Archer, a 2-mana vigilance reach creature that whenever it attacks will allow you to put a +1/+1 counter on any creature you control that's either a token or a rabbit, which I suppose is a nice way to grow your creature tokens from the Sea Devils, Finale of Glory or Fort Eorlingas even further. But the main reason why this card is included is that whenever he does attack and you do have a total power of 10 or more on the battlefield, you will get to draw a card. And the only thing you need is a Phineas and a Duskana on the battlefield and then swing with him, because he will then grow to a 5/5 stat line, and combined with Duskana you will meet the requirement and draw another card every single combat. Jorkadeen, the first Gold Warden, a 2-mana creature that whenever it attacks and it is equipped or something, it will get a +X/+X stat boost, but that ability doesn't really matter because we aren't really an equipment deck. What does matter is that whenever you do attack with this creature and it does have a total power of 4 or greater, we get to draw a card, making it function in exactly the same way as a Phineas. I suppose you do get some bonus points if you are able to get your Glimmerlands attached to this. Archivist of Ogma, a 2-mana flash creature that whenever any opponent searches their library will gain you 1 life and allow you to draw 1 card. And let me tell you, this is one of the best draw engines in the entire Commander format, because people will always be searching their libraries. It will trigger whenever anyone is casting a tutor, whenever they're playing simple acceleration spells like a Farseek or a Nature's Lore, and even whenever any of your opponents are cracking a fetch land, you will be rewarded with some free card draw. I can assure you, if you are able to drop this creature on turn 2, by the time you get to your turn 4, it will have drawn you like 5 additional cards or something, making this thing feel like the more fair version of an Esper Sentinel, and also a lot more affordable. Goliath, Mass Manipulator, a new card we got in the recent Marvel set. It's a 2-drop creature that does come with a new power-up mechanic, meaning the turn this creature enters the battlefield, you'll be able to power him up and the cost will even be reduced by 2 mana. When you do activate it, you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters onto this creature, and you will get to draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Now once again, this might sound pretty counterintuitive in a deck that's all about playing creatures with 2 power, but just keep in mind that Duskana's stat boost will remain active until the end of turn. So you can just go for a big swing with all of your 2/2 creatures and grow them into that 5/5 stat line, and then in your second main phase you can just cast this card and you will be able to draw like 5 to 10 cards by just paying 5 mana, making it feel like a shamanic revelation attached to a 2/2 creature body. Kutsil, Malamet Exemplar, a 3-drop creature that just like a Grand Abolisher will prevent opponents from casting spells during your turn, meaning that you'll never have to worry about your opponents casting some instant speed board wipes or counter spells during your turn, and you can just do your thing without being disrupted. Now, while that effect is already incredibly solid in today's meta where a ton of instant speed interaction is being played, he also comes with the ability that whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to an opponent and their power is bigger than their base power, you get to draw a card of that. And yeah, thanks to Duskana stat boosting, our creatures will always meet this requirement. Now, due to the way of how this card is worded, whenever you have it on the battlefield, you actually want to be swinging your creatures at different opponents. Because if you connect with 3 creatures to a single opponent, you will only get to draw 1 card, but if you do connect with 3 creatures to 3 different opponents, you will get to draw 3 cards of this effect. Laelia, the Blade Reforged, a 3-drop haste creature that whenever it attacks will allow us to impulse draw, meaning we get to exile the top card of our library and we get the ability to play it until the end of turn, just giving us some pseudo card advantage every single turn by giving us access to the top card of our library. And pro gameplay tip, if you do have this creature on the battlefield, you want to swing with her first before actually making your land drop, because if you do exile a land from the top, you can just play it straight from exile and otherwise that card would just be wasted. And passively, whenever any of your cards are put into exile from your library or your graveyard, this card will get a +1/+1 counter, just synergizing perfectly with her own first ability while triggering things like Mikey and Leo, while also growing bigger and bigger over the course of the game. Mentor of the Meek. Whenever any creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under our control, we get the option to pay 1 generic mana, and when we do, we get to draw a card of it. Since every turn we will be casting a bunch of 2-power creatures or creating 2/2 tokens, this dude gives us a way to convert any sort of spare mana we have into a consistent stream of card draw. Not a fancy ability by any means, but it can generate you some really crazy value, especially when you combine it with your token generators. And the last card in this section, and another addition we got in the Marvel set, is Mr. Hyde. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to pick one out of its 2 options. You either get to put a +1/+1 counter onto Mr. Hyde, just growing his body, and the real reason why it's included is a second ability that will allow you to remove any counter from any creature you control, and when you do, he will draw you a card. Now, as you've seen, we will always have a bunch of counters stacked on all of our creatures, either be it a Wandertail Mentor, or Phineas putting counters onto our tokens, or Felidar Retreat just handing them out like candy. And whenever you have a Warden of the Grove on the battlefield, you will have more counters than you know what to do with, and this card will translate it into additional card draw. Next up, we have our protection and interaction. Now, usually building up a big board of creature bodies will put a huge target for a board wipe on your back, which is exactly why we're playing a highly efficient package of protection and interaction to disrupt whatever our opponents are doing while also keeping our entire board safe. After all, there's not much point in assembling a big board of 2/2 creature bodies if we are playing straight into a board wipe anyways. Bounty Agent, a 2-mana vigilance body that we can tap and sacrifice to destroy any sort of legendary artifact, creature, or enchantment, giving us a really solid way to just pinpoint remove any sort of high value card that our opponents might have on the battlefield or even their commander. And in this type of deck, I really prefer playing cards like this over things like a classic Path to Exile, and that is simply because this tool does come attached to a 2/2 creature body that does help us advance our own game plan. It will draw us additional cards of Duskana, it will receive Duskana's combat stat boost, and thanks to it having vigilance, we can just keep swinging with it and it will still be available for use whenever we need it most. And a card with kind of the opposite effect is a Cliffside Rescuer, another 2-mana vigilance creature body that we can sacrifice to give any of our creatures protection from all of our opponents until the end of turn, meaning that our opponents won't be able to deal damage to that creature, block it, or target it with any sort of spell or ability, both making it into an excellent effect to protect both your Duskana or any of your value creatures from being spot removed, while at the same time also giving you a way to make your double strike Wolverine unblockable and making sure you can get combat damage through and instantly take an opponent out of the game. And just like the previous card, you can just swing with this creature thanks to the vigilance for 5 damage with Duskana on the field, and it will still be available available to tap and sacrifice whenever you do need its effect. Safi Eriksdotter, another 2-drop creature with a really solid protection effect. We can sacrifice her, and whenever target creature is put into a graveyard this turn, we just get to return it to the battlefield instead, making it function in exactly the same way as the previous card that we can use whenever our board does get wiped or our Duskana does get spot removed. The main difference being that the creature will return to the battlefield instead of gaining protection, and we will get another ETB trigger out of Duskana whenever we use it on her. Bulwark Ox, another 2-mana creature we can sacrifice on instant speed, and it will give all creatures we control with a +1/+1 counter on them both hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn, just making this card into the perfect early game body to have on the battlefield to draw cards with Duskana that you can crack later in the game whenever any of your opponents is casting a board wipe to just protect your entire board. Because as you've seen, once we do have things like a Felidar Retreat or a Warden of the Grove on the battlefield, it will be incredibly easy to get +1/+1 counters spread across all of our creatures. And even if you don't have a counter enabler on the battlefield, you can just settle up this creature, and whenever you do so, it will even allow you to put a single +1/+1 counter onto any creature you control, which will make sure that it gets this card's effect whenever you do sacrifice it. Batroc de Liber, another card we got in the Marvel set, and I must admit, the first time I saw this dude, I fell in love. It's a 2-mana 2/2 creature that does come with a multi-kicker ability, meaning we can kick it any amount of times by paying 2 generic mana. He will then enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter for every time we did kick him, and then whenever he enters, he will deal damage equal to his power up to X targets, X being the total amount of times we kick this guy. Now first up, this dude is really great to cast from as early as turn 3, because you will be able to do so for just 4 mana, and it will give you a free lightning bolt, allowing you to snipe any sort of value creature that your opponents might have on the battlefield. But where this card really shines is that whenever you are able to cast him in the late game, he will allow you to deal some absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. If you kick him 2 times, you will be able to deal 4 damage to 2 targets, 3 times will result in him dealing a total of 15 damage, and if you do kick him 4 times, you will be able to deal a total of 24 damage, 6 damage to up to 4 targets. I really don't know why, but I really love the design on this card. And a pretty similar removal card is Moloch, a 2-drop creature that whenever it enters the battlefield will fight one creature you don't control, and if that creature does die during the fight, it does get exiled instead of going to the graveyard. And this thing also comes with the Ravenous mechanic, meaning that whenever we cast it, we get the option to pay X amount of mana, and it will enter with an additional +1/+1 counter for any sort of mana that we paid. If we did pay 5 or more, we even get to draw a card of it. You can just cast this early in the game to remove that one opponent's Esper Sentinel, and later in the game you can just invest additional mana into it, and you will be able to make it fight any sort of big creature on the battlefield and just remove it from the game. A really versatile card that does adapt to whatever stage of the game you're currently in. Outland Liberator, a 2-mana creature that we can invest 1 generic mana into, and when we do, we can sacrifice it to destroy any sort of enchantment or artifact on the battlefield, giving us a way to disrupt any sort of combo player's plan by removing their Phyrexian Altar or a Storm player's Area of Flame. And this thing also comes with a Daybound mechanic, meaning that if no players cast a spell on a previous turn, we do get to flip it into its backside, which is a 3/3 creature with exactly the same ability that sadly due to its stat line won't work with Duskana anymore. But whenever it does attack, we get to destroy any sort of artifact or enchantment that the defending player does control, essentially just doubling up on its artifact/enchantment removal value. Downstruce, a 2-mana spell that whenever we cast it will give all of our permanents and ourselves hexproof until the end of turn, making it an excellent answer for whenever an opponent is casting a Pot to Exile targeted at any of your value creatures or Duskana. And this card also comes with the gift mechanic, meaning whenever we cast it, we get the option to make an opponent draw a card, and when we do, all of our permanents will also get indestructible, making this into one of the most cost-efficient cards we can use as an answer versus board wipes. Now before you ask, in the comments, I do prefer playing this card over a classic Heroic Intervention, and the main reason being is that giving your opponents a single extra card in a game of Commander usually doesn't really matter, and I really like the fact that this thing does give you hexproof as a player, because if you're playing against a White deck that just did 100 damage to their Bresh Counter, they can can't redirect it at you, and even if a Storm player is casting 1000 copies of their Grapeshot, you won't be able to be taken out of the game by those. And another card with a gift mechanic is Parting Gust. For 2 white mana, you get to blink any non-token creature on the battlefield, giving you a way to protect your Duskana from any sort of board wipe or spot removal, and giving you a way to get another trigger out of her ETB ability. Now the best part about this card is that whenever you do promise the gift and give an opponent a single 1/1 fish token, the creature you do decide to exile with this effect won't ever return to the battlefield, giving you a really cost-efficient option you can use as spot removal or as an additional way to generate value with your commander. Arwen, Mortal Queen, a 3-mana creature that will enter the battlefield with an indestructibility counter on herself, making it incredibly hard for your opponents to ever get this off the board. And by paying 1 generic mana and removing the indestructibility counter, we get to give any creature we control indestructible until the end of turn, while at the same time also putting a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on both the target creature and Arwen. Functioning as an additional protection tool we can use on instant speed for just 1 mana to protect any of our creatures, while also allowing us to scale our board even further, and the lifelink counters can actually be really relevant in this deck, because with all of our Anthem effects, counter stacking and Duskana's ability, we will always be swinging for a huge amount of damage, which Arwen will then translate into incredible amounts of life gain, especially due to the fact that we get to put lifelink counters onto 2 creatures. Flawless Maneuver. For 3 mana on instant speed, we get to give all creatures we control indestructible. But whenever we do have our commander on the battlefield, instead of paying the mana cost of this card, we get to cast it for free. Now a really controversial opinion that I have is that all of the cards that cost 0 mana whenever you do have your commander on the battlefield should be banned in the format, because they allow you to just tap out all of your mana and advance your board, and even if your opponents think you don't have any sort of interaction ready, you will still be able to cast this spell. That being said, a card like this is just the perfect fit for what we're trying to do in this deck, and it's just way too efficient not to include. Next up, we're also playing 2 MDFC land cards, the first one being Bridgeworks Battle, a 3-mana sorcery that will give any creature we control a +2/+2 stat boost and then make it fight any creature we don't control, giving us access to another tool we can use to spot remove any creature on the battlefield that we don't like, especially considering that you can just cast this in your second main phase after all of your creatures got that +3/+2 stat boost thanks to Duskana, and you will always win in a fight. Now the main reason this card is included in the deck is due to the fact that if you don't need its effect, you can just play the backside, which is a land that taps for a green mana and even enters the battlefield untapped for the low cost of 3 life. You should really view all of these MDFC lands as lands first that do have an additional effect whenever you do draw into them later in the game. Witch Enchanter, a 4-mana 2/2 creature that whenever it enters the battlefield will allow you to destroy either target artifact or enchantment. Yeah, just another simple 2/2 body that does come with some built-in disruption whenever you play it. And once again, if you don't need it, just play the backside, which does function as some sort of a basic plains when you don't need the creature. And the last card in this section is Dusk and Dawn. Now the Dusk part of this card is a 4-mana spell that will destroy all creatures on the battlefield with power 3 or greater. And this thing just scales incredibly well with what we're trying to do in this deck. By including this many 2/2 bodies, most of them will be safe whenever you cast this. That being said, this card sort of is on the chopping block, because usually we will have either an Anthem effect or a counter stacker on the field, and our creatures will actually have 3 or more power. Now that little downside aside, let's take a look at the down part of this card, which has the Aftermath mechanic, meaning whenever this is in our graveyard, we get the ability to cast it for 4 mana straight from there. And when we do, we simply get to return all creatures with power 2 or less from our graveyard straight to the battlefield, which, just like I explained, is more than half of the cards we are running in this deck. So even whenever you are casting the Dusk part of this card with a bunch of boosted creatures on the battlefield and you do wipe your own board, on a later turn you will simply be able to cast the down part and just get everything back. Next up, we have our mana base. And while I didn't build this deck on any sort of specific budget, I did decide to keep the list somewhat budget friendly, meaning we're playing some powerful utility lands. The other lands will give us consistent access to all 3 of our colors, and most importantly, it does make this deck accessible to the vast majority of Commander players. Abandoned Air Temple, and this thing is basically the new and improved version of a Gavany Township. By paying 4 mana and tapping this land, we get to put a +1/+1 counter onto all creatures we control, both making it really easy to gain card advantage of cards like Mikey and Leo and Mr. Hyde, while at the same time also giving us a tool on something as simple as a land to grow our board even further while our creatures will still apply for Duskana stat boost. Minas Tirith, a land that will enter the battlefield untapped if we do control a legendary creature, and by paying 2 mana and tapping this land we get to draw a card, but we can only activate this ability if we attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. Now since we are a really combat centric deck, we will always be swinging with our creatures and meeting this requirement, making Minas Tirith into a really solid draw engine that will provide us with an additional card every turn for the low cost of just 2 mana. Mossword Bridge, a land that does come with a hideaway mechanic, meaning whenever it enters the battlefield we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library, pick one of those cards and then exile it under this land. Then on a later turn, by paying 1 green mana and tapping this land, we get to cast the exiled card for absolutely free, but we do need a total of 10 power on the battlefield. Now as you can imagine, with all of the stat boosting we'll be doing in this deck with all of our counters and Duskana, this will be an incredibly easy requirement to meet. Just imagine you playing this land on turn 1 and exiling your Craterhoof Behemoth under it. Then by the time you get to your turn 5 and you established a really solid board of creatures, you can just get it into play for 1 green mana, buff up your entire board, and usually you will just be able to win the game on the spot. And the last utility land we are playing is a Mutavault, which for just 1 colorless mana you can animate into a 2/2 creature body. Obviously scaling really well with Duskana's ability because it will be another 5/5 body swinging at your opponents. If you are about to cast Duskana and you do have 1 spare mana, you can just animate Mutavault using its own colorless mana production into a creature and you will get to draw an additional card. And if you do have your Black Panther on the battlefield, you can just stack a huge amount of counters onto your Mutavault and you will be able to animate it and deal a huge amount of damage with it. For the regular mana producing lands, we're playing 3 Shock lands, 3 Pain lands, 3 Check lands, 3 Slow lands, 3 Bond lands, 2 Horizon lands, a Command Tower, the Selesnya Pathway, the Naya Landscape, and for basics we're playing 3 Forests, 3 Plains, and 2 Mountains. And as promised, here is something that I've never done before, a rapid fire considering section. I'll quickly be going over some awesome cards that I did find by doing research into this deck, and I will explain why I didn't include them in the deck and in what situations they can actually be great. Collector, oof. If you are playing in any sort of pot where a ton of artifacts are being played, this dude is the perfect addition for the deck. They won't be able to use their mana rocks, sacrifice any of their artifact eggs, and they won't even be able to use sacrifice engines like a Phyrexian Altar. Especially considering we're only playing 3 artifacts in our own deck, this is usually a one-sided effect. Gnorlit Colony. This little 2-drop bear will give all creatures you control that have a counter on them the trample keyword. Now as you've seen, we do have a really easy time putting +1/+1 counters on our entire board, but during testing this card always felt really underwhelming and I really preferred things like a Craterhoof Behemoth and a Glorious Sunrise over this card. They always felt a lot more impactful. Go Ninja Go! Go Ninja Go! For 2 mana, this spell will allow you to blink one of your creatures and then deal damage to any creature on the battlefield equal to the greatest power amongst creatures you control. Now while obviously this card seems really great on paper because you will get double the Duskana value and you will get to remove an opposing creature, this card does have one big downside, and that is that you can only cast it on sorcery speed, meaning that you can't actually use it as a way to protect your creatures from any sort of spot removal. Granzo. Havoc Razor. Now while this is one of my favorite 2-drop creatures ever printed because he does have some crazy abilities that will allow you to goad up the entire board or just steal cards from your opponent's decks, this card was just always stuck in my hand because even though if you are able to steal like 10 cards from your opponent's decks, thanks to Duskana's crazy amount of card draw, your hand will always be filled with your own cards you can play that do synergize better with your game plan. Hexing Squelcher. And I mean, just take a look at the third line of text on this card. Your spells can be countered. Yeah, if you are playing in a pot where a ton of counter magic is being played, just include this dude and make your opponents cry. Razorkin Needlehead. Whenever any opponent draws a card, this creature will deal 1 damage to them. Now while I really wanted to include this card in the main board of this deck because it does add an additional layer of pressure, where it really shines is if you are playing in specific pots with a ton of Spellslinger players casting a ton of cantrips, or even against a Nekuzar deck that's about to wheel every player 3 times in a single turn. Scavenging Ooze. If you are facing any sort of graveyard strategy like an Emotech, a Necrobloom, or even a Sephiris, this little classic ooze has got you covered. And another really specific counter card is a Vengeful Tracker, because whenever any opponent sacrifices an artifact, this dude will deal 2 damage to them. Play this against any sort of clue, treasure, food, or artifact sacrifice deck, and your opponents will just simply be locked out of the game. Exocrine. For 3 mana plus X, you get a Ravenous creature that will enter the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, and whenever it does deal damage equal to its power to all creatures. Just swing with your entire board of 2/2 bodies and grow them into 5/5 stat lines. Cast this card for a total of 7 mana, deal 4 damage to everything, and this will function as a one-sided board wipe. Cassandra Eagle Bearer and Spear of Leonidas. Whenever Cassandra enters the battlefield, you get to fetch up the spear and put it straight onto the battlefield without paying its mana cost. The spear will then simply give double strike to whatever creature that it's equipped to, scaling perfectly well with all of the stat boosting that we'll be doing in this deck. And passively, whenever any creature equipped with legendary equipment you control does deal combat damage to an opponent, Cassandra will draw you cards of it, which will actually trigger twice thanks to the creature having double strike. Now while she is a pretty good draw engine, she did feel really underwhelming for our early game tempo during playtesting. Taurian Mauler, a 2-drop creature that will get a counter whenever any of your opponents cast a spell. Now I'm gonna be honest, I should have totally included this creature in the deck, because if this thing just sticks around for like 3 turn cycles or something, it will grow into a 30/30 body. That being said, it is a pretty boring card and I really don't think it fits the theme of the deck. Sutina, Speaker of the Tajuru, a card I had never ever seen before. When it enters, we get to fetch a basic land from our deck to the battlefield tapped, and whenever it attacks, we get the option to return a land back to our hand, and whenever we do, we get to put a +1/+1 counter onto any target. Now while obviously having access to an additional acceleration tool that can even function as a counter engine is really nice, the thing that really makes this deck work is having all of our acceleration available in the 2 mana slot. Unless the cards have a really crazy effect like Atalan Jackal or Prosperous Bandit. Huntmaster of the Fells, and back when I started playing Magic, this used to be my favorite card. For 4 mana you get a 2/2 creature that will enter the battlefield with a 2/2 wolf token, and whenever you're able to flip it, it will ping some damage to a creature an opponent controls or whatever, but that doesn't really matter, because first up, it's actually really hard to flip it, and whenever you compare it to something like an Asika's Chariot or an Edipo's Offspring, this card is just a straight downgrade. Michiko Konda, another really awesome card I had never seen before making this video. Whenever any source an opponent controls does deal damage to you, they will have to sacrifice a permanent. And I'm telling you, against some specific decks that rely on pinging down the table really slowly like a Vivi, a General Create, or a Valgavoth, this card is just their absolute worst nightmare. Hexblade Wallbreaker, a 5 mana equipment that does come in attached to a 2/2 creature token body thanks to it having the 4 Mirror the mechanic, and whenever the equipped creature does attack, we get to untap all of our creatures and we do get an additional combat phase. Now while additional combats do scale really well with Duskana's +3/+3 stat boost because it will last until the end of turn, giving you +3/3 in the first combat phase and +6/6 in the second combat phase, having to pay a total of 5 mana for this effect never really felt great and it was always just stuck in my hand. It's the first time ever I'm testing out this rapid fire segment at the end of the video just to be able to showcase even more cards that I found while I was doing research. So if you like it and you want to see it more in future videos, let me know in the comments below. And even if this was a total waste of your time, also let me know in the comments below and I'll never do it again. Anyways, that's it for my take on the Duskana Rage modder. While on paper building an entire list filled with 2/2 creatures might sound incredibly restrictive, in reality it ended up being one of the most open-ended and most rewarding deck building projects that I've done in a while. It's one of those decks you can easily adapt to whatever playgroup you are playing in and you can totally make it ooze a ton of personality, just including all of the 2/2 creatures you like most. As always, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know by dropping a bear emoji in the comments below. And while you're there, hit the like button, hit subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so you won't miss next week's video. Anyways, thanks for watching, enjoy turning your tiny little creatures into absolute monsters, and I will see you in the next one.